I want to say, how's everybody doing? But I probably should just introduce myself because I know we have limited time and it's just different, right? Like not having everybody right in front of you. I mean, the old school, the old school way of having live people in front of you. Thank you guys for choosing my class. My name is Stephanie Siete. I'm the public information officer for Community Bridges. Maybe some of you are familiar with our agency, maybe some of you aren't, but I'm going to just briefly mention us now and at the end share more resources. This might sound like a long class at 45 minutes. But the reality is when you're talking about this topic, I think the number one thing I get from people is, gosh, could have stayed longer, could have learned more. So as the PIO, Public Information Officer, my job is to work with the media, educate people. I would say give out the information about what's happening in the world of drugs, as we're a 24/7 behavioral healthcare agency, right? Like offer services, never close. The holidays and the happy times for most people is sometimes the hardest time for our clientele. So we've been around since the early 80s. I've watched us grow from an agency of maybe 50 employees to close to 1,700. And I think I open every talk, whether that be to police officers, I talk to them, parents, students. I tell everybody that we're a growing agency because of the need, right? That's how big drug use is in Arizona because we're a statewide provider. So that said, I know the focus is more about opioid trends. If you're not familiar with opioids, that's okay. I'll give you some background, but do understand that this is a very intense, direct look. So if you guys do have questions, type them in the chat. We're going to leave room at the end. I'm watching the clock so that we can answer them as well, answer them at the end. But I also took note before I started with you guys that they are recording this presentation. So you will get a copy of it because I think that's a big concern too, is that was a lot of information really fast. So you'll get a recording, take pictures of slides that are important, get your pens out now, start taking notes because there's a lot of resources here that I think would be helpful for people. I know the conference focuses on veterans, family members, service providers, what have you, but really this is a class that's for everyone. Why? Let's jump into it. Because drug overdose deaths are on the rise just in general. So as opposed to just talking opioids, let's piece this all together. If I tell you 81,000 drug overdoses occurred in a 12-month period that ended in May of 2020, now mind you, obviously we're living in a whole new era. We're dealing with something we've never dealt with. That's why I said, like in a COVID world, usually we record this data that ends in December. So you look at that 12-month calendar year. Again, I'll put this all together for you. 81,000 deaths, fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, all on the rise. We as Arizonans are familiar with methamphetamine. It's been a drug of choice here in the state for a long time. But I want you to also know in terms of like the most current information, according to HIDTA, the high intensity drug trafficking area, fentanyl may pass methamphetamine as an Arizona drug of choice. That's very, very scary considering how deadly this drug is. Seems like my computer froze, but there we go. Okay, so the reason I'm also kind of breaking this down at the beginning with data is now I'm showing you 3 months later, because again, with the pandemic, we're looking at different collection of data. So now you're looking at May versus August, 12-month collection. Over 88,000 people died from drug overdoses. And what's the leader? Fentanyl and opioids. We'll talk about all of them. Again, this thing's freezing. I apologize. Maybe I just need to use my mouse. Okay. Fentanyl, meth, cocaine, all on the rise. I shared that. I'm showing you the data, but I'm going to explain to you. I'll just say a couple of it right now. The number one cause of death, I'll get into more detail about this when it comes to opioids, is respiratory arrest. It impacts our breathing. Already putting it all together, why I said in a COVID world is things that we've learned this year is from, obviously we have to wash our hands. That actually ties to fentanyl, but how breathing is important. Our lungs are being impacted by COVID. You kill your breathing with opioids. That's why there's restrictions on prescription. That's why there's emphasis on being cautious and careful, and why heroin and fentanyl are so dangerous and deadly. You look at some of the numbers here. I just told you 88,000 deaths. We saw a decline before the pandemic. We saw a decline in drug deaths. That isn't happening, right? Like now we're looking at 1 year later, it bounced up on the rise. And then I got into the 80 something thousand deaths. I guess where I'm going with this is in 365 days, that's a lot of people dying in the United States of America. This is very current information because it shows you with that line right there that this is where the pandemic started, and huge spike in deaths, huge spike in deaths specific to opioids. Here's a US look, but you want to see where we are. And sadly, you see that we're a darker colored state, which emphasizes that we've had the bigger increases in overdose deaths here in Arizona. Synthetic opioids, we're going to talk a lot about that in this class. Synthetic is man-made or chemically altered. And methamphetamine is truly your like original synthetic drug. Drain cleaner, battery acid, iodine, pool acid, chemicals that are manufactured. Even our marijuana of today, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention this, is cooked. I feel like that's the number one question I'm getting from especially parents of teenagers. What's BHO, butane honey oil? Our marijuana is cooked with butane. So today's drugs in general are more prevalent, more potent, more powerful. I keep sharing these big numbers. Oh my gosh, 88,000 people died, 80,000. The majority are dying from opioids. That's why this is such a relevant class when they asked me to speak about opioids and tying it to, tied to the veteran population, but tied to everybody. Coping mechanisms for people dealing with pain, trauma, anxiety is usually opioids. You know what I mean? And look what's happening. We're seeing people dying as a result of it. It's very scary, very sad. Sometimes the keys want to freeze. Increase almost 50,000 out of 70,000 that 1 year in terms of death. Don't look over heroin, overlook heroin and prescription painkillers because they're also causing people to stop breathing. People are mixing their drugs. It's not like they're just using downer, depressant, pain reliever type stuff. Cocaine is a stimulant. Back in the day, we'd call that a speedball, mixing an upper and a downer. Cocaine is also being cut into a lot of these opioids. So again, I think I've said this, but I think it's the emphasis as you piece this all together that this impacts everyone. Drugs don't discriminate. I don't care what color people are or aren't, what money they have or don't, where they live or they don't. We're truly seeing drugs impact all ages, all races, everybody. So we got to get past the just say no and be more about being in the know, being knowledgeable people so we can gain information and save lives. Again, the emphasis being the pandemic. You're going to see more people dealing with anxiety, depression, fear, that there's more use of the opioids. We've seen 21 to 29% of patients misuse them for chronic pain. We've seen 80% of people who've used heroin started with prescription opioids. So there's this connection. And what I like to explain to people is you say opioid, you're talking about like the painkiller families down here, heroin's above it, and then fentanyl's on the top. Fentanyl being the most powerful, the most potent. And I'm going to show you what that is, what that looks like here. Before I do, sadly, you've also got to connect to the suicide factor, right? Suicide in this country, awful. This is data pre-pandemic, knowing that over 47,000 people had committed suicide in 2019. When you get very specific, it's my dog saying hi, it's about time to give him the sticks. When you get specific about our first responders, firefighters, and police officers, they're the ones that are helping us. They're the ones that rush out, deal with the trauma, help assist us. But we've got more of them dying from suicide than in the line of duty. That's scary because what does that mean for our children who are the young, the developing, the growing, the trying to figure out life? Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 34-year-olds. This breaks my heart because this is just, as I said, data. It's averaging things. Do you know how many calls we take or stories we see on the news about 9-year-olds committing suicide? I think my question is, I go back to at 9, could I spell suicide, let alone know what it was and how to do that? we've got to like jump in, intervene with people, not just kids. Like I'll say right now at the end of this, I'm going to ask you guys to turn on your cameras. Connection. We're all missing it. It's not just our kids when they were out of school. We saw major increase in people with, again, the stress, the anxiety, the fear, and the suicide. We'll share resources here in a little bit. So I keep going back to the coronavirus, COVID, talking about what we keep learning from what it is to vaccines. Information's always changing, but we know it attacks the lungs. And I think that's a big part of talking about opioids. You know, I will also share another thing that I get asked about regularly, especially if people have teenagers, is vaping. Well, again, that impacts the lungs. So a lot of these drug trends, you know, it's almost common sense when you understand the risks and what's happening and why sometimes it can be dangerous or fatal. We can't just spit out the trends, because here's the thing, you guys, I understand that opioids work when someone is dealing with pain, right? Prescription painkillers are there, they're beneficial. But when we're talking about a society like ours, who specifically abuses these, misuses them, I think we've got to come up with other alternatives to pain and ask the questions like, what are we missing? What are the expectations of happiness? I know everybody, like, sure, wouldn't we want to be a 1 through 10? Be a 10 today? You know, oh my gosh, it was the best day ever. It was like a 10. We got to reserve that for like the things like graduation, which, you know, that got impacted. But, you know, marriage, celebrations of jobs. My point is, it's okay to have down days, but we got to know how to cope with it. So be prepared to talk to people and check in with them, because not all our days are going to be good. You know, I had a freak accident happen where I actually almost went blind, retinal detachment, this and that. And I always tell people, for months, I was probably dealing with a 2 in terms of level, you know, 1 through 10 of feeling good and happy, but I got through it. I'm going to try to give you guys some real life examples, and you'll see that here in a few minutes, of how we cope with that, because we can't have more Americans dying from, you know, opioid overdoses than car accidents. We do, but I think we got to work on that. We got to fix it. We can't have the headline news being how many 12,000 kids are poisoned by opioids every year, and then showing these examples of kids finding their parents dead, kids calling 911. Kids are learning the hard way. This is not specific to one community. This is everybody. Tied to Arizona, we're a border state to Mexico, right? Like, we're going to see a lot of the drugs trafficked through us that are meant for Chicago and New York, what have you. I always point out, you got like one truck here with 254 pounds of fentanyl, 395 pounds of meth, $4.6 million value on one truck. These shows on like National Geographic, Dateline, what have you, they're not made up. This is America. This is the problem. You know, I don't know that we're dealing with pain the best that we can. Pills should not be our only options. I'm almost answering the questions that I would normally ask you guys because of time, but just, it's kind of challenging the thinking. We'll get into talking about naloxone, Narcan, but that can't be the cure-all. I get it that we want to encourage people to carry it, learn how to administer it, but we can't bring back everybody. When I say the US loves RX, that we love our prescription drugs, here's the big 3. The most common drugs involved in prescription opioid deaths: methadone, oxycodone, hydrocodone. Those are the big 3. This kind of shows you prescription opioids deaths are still happening. It doesn't look as big as it does with like the fentanyl and the heroin, but it all pieces together. Well, I want you guys to have copies of the PowerPoint. Sure, you're getting the recording. Please hear me when I say this. I can give you my email address. If you want a hard copy, I'm really fine with that too, because, or just take a picture of this, of some of these slides. These are great little resources to have at your fingertips in your phone, right? Like what you need to know, what to look for, options for helping somebody, because I'm really big on summaries. Look at this, is like the professional slide with all the details. I'll come back to it, but I speak more from this picture, which might look a little amusing to people, but it's not. When I said I'm a direct person, people get physically sick with opioids. So again, if you kind of watch with my hands here, I know my crazy bright nails. I coach a softball team and we're the Neon Sluggers. Anyway, when someone's withdrawal happens from using this, it's not like this. Let me explain. It's like this. We say it's best to never start, right? Like in terms of abusing substances, but maybe someone legitimately was given opioid medication for pain. Professionals say that even after 5 days, you should find alternative medicine because you can get physically addicted to this stuff. So after so many days, you're building up a tolerance. Maybe you're abusing this. If you were to stop, you would hit a wall. You would hit a wall because your body's used to all of the different medications, all of the different opioids that it's now adjusted to. You stop it, and your body goes like this picture: nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, muscle pain, bone pain, tremors, and shakes. You're violently sick as a result of stopping the use. Again, if you'd never gotten addicted to this, if you'd never started, you might not have to go through this. But it's not like food poisoning. Like for 24 hours, you feel like garbage. 24 hours. It's more like 5, 10, 15, possibly 20 days of hell of nonstop nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, muscle pain, bone pain, tremors, and shakes. Could be freezing 1 minute, sweating the next. That's why this picture is so accurate. You're physically sick. I go back to my hands. No one wants to go through this. As tough as you are, that's hard to get through the longevity of this. So some people realize, well, wait a minute. I feel this sick because I stopped using. What if I keep using? Skip this. They skip it. They increase their likelihood of killing themselves, right? Respiratory arrest. Because you've got to go through the withdrawal, get through this to get on the other side to your path to recovery. That's why this is so important. Knowing your options, understanding what the trends are, looking at the risks, but also knowing what to do if you do see someone overdose, because clearly this is a problem in this country. If we have almost 50,000 people dying every year from opioids pre-pandemic out of the 70,000. So this has clearly been a problem for quite some time. These are all resources. Alternatives to pain management. Sure, it can't just be popping pills. Massage, biofeedback, exercise. I'm a big fan of that one, but just meditation, stepping away from the minute, giving ourselves time for oneself. Everyone keeps hearing my children barking in the background. Yes, them being the dogs, but that actually ties into, I'm disappointed that they're doing this right now. Usually they're very well behaved, but they do help us, people who suffer from depression, feel better, less likely to anxiety and depression. Pet owners over 65 years of age make 30% fewer visits to the doctors. This can calm us, can elevate levels of serotonin and dopamine. I have to kind of show you their pictures. I don't know how he grew from that little thing to that big thing in less than a year, but usually for the most time, this is my happy. And it's a reason to get home. It's a reason to think beyond yourself. How am I relating this to all of us in this class? And someone that you're concerned about, a loved one, is what's their passion? What's their love? Try to take them back to that. Because as much as this country loves prescription drugs, this country, I'll relate it to this, loves pets. When I used to get in front of kids and how many of you have a pet? All these hands go up. And I would try to relate it to them about how you need to be there to be their caregiver and provide for them. I apologize. Good thing I'm prepared with lots of dog food. Resources. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to give you guys lots of resources. This one's actually kind of old, but it was on NBC News. They did a very big special series about One Nation Overdosed. So all the links are there. You could Google One Nation Overdosed. Sam Quinones, awesome. He's got another cartel book coming out like right now. Wrote a great book that gives you the history of opioids in this country called Dreamland. Why would you write a book about that? Why is there so many shows and stories about all this stuff? The United States, we are really not the biggest country. We're only 5% of the world's population, and yet we consume 80% of the world's supply of opioids. I pause on that, you guys. This is not normal. Other countries don't operate like this. We are truly dependent on medications to fix, there's a pill for every ill. That's the United States of America. What's the problem? Look at the progression. Heroin use, it's been around for decades, but when people were getting introduced to heroin and they were still scared about it and they were injecting it back in the 80s, we're talking about stuff that was 3-4% purity levels. Today, you can see upwards of 90% pure heroin. There's no need to inject it. There's so many pill-based stuff. It's so confusing as to what's out there. Heroin is involved in a lot of the deaths. You're going to see me skip some of the slides. I'm watching the time. Heroin can look like oxycodone. So many things to think about and say here. You never know what you're getting with a pill. And we've got to emphasize that. Again, why can this not be our only it's not a be all end all. This can't be our only resource for helping people, because what might look like a Percocet and oxycodone could ultimately be something else. And I'm going to give some examples here in a minute of cases that have happened, but this is just one of them. We've seen a lot of individuals die from heroin overdoses. Money doesn't fix it. Money doesn't save them. Popularity, celebrities, what have you. Everyday people. Now, I apologize that I took the video out of this because we don't have time, but if you're interested, Google Time Magazine, Ohio heroin overdoses, because this happened in Ohio, and you will see this was like their cover. This was the Time Magazine story feature of the year, that you've got children, in this case, a 4-year-old sitting in the back seat with slumped over guardians in the front seat, right? The story is set. They're literally like right outside of school. School buses are rolling by. They're picking up kids, and this is what kids are seeing. This is America. When you've got toddlers crying in the aisle, mommy, mommy, wake up, mommy. And mommy's overdosing from heroin in an aisle. That you've got kids finding their parents dead, but they don't even know what to do about it. The kid's 7 years old and tells a school bus monitor that her parents haven't moved for more than 2 days and are changing colors. What's the trauma with that child for the rest of their life? There's no good batches of heroin, but I got to say that a lot of this stuff's getting cut with fentanyl. And again, tie this to Arizona. This isn't, I don't want to say it's common. It's common that fentanyl is so prevalent in the state of Arizona, around this country, more so here with us, 100 times more potent than morphine, 50 times stronger than heroin. It's on the rise. I think the biggest thing to take away here is potency and profit. You don't need a lot of fentanyl in your product to sell it, to use it, because it's so darn deadly. I'm going to show you some pictures, but that's what makes it profitable to the people. When they purchase it to sell this, they don't have to use a lot to cut it in the heroin, the cocaine, and the methamphetamine. So pill seizures are on the rise. People are picking this stuff up everywhere. It's a big problem all around the country, specifically here in Arizona. It's a trend that's on the rise. There's unique ways that this stuff is trafficked into this country. I think that's another thing that people have to take note of. We're going to start talking about Narcan and naloxone here in a little bit, but all of our first responders need this stuff on hand, right? They get exposed to it, they could die instantly. And I'll say it now and I'll show it to you in a little bit. You don't die from just touching it. Oh my God, I touched it, I'm dead. That's not how this happens. But what did I say about pre-pandemic, with the beginning of it? Oh, wash your hands. We should have always been washing our hands, because if we touch this, don't wash our hands, rub our eyes, our nose, eat our food, this can be toxic, deadly, and poisonous. And now if you're the officer who's doing investigations, this can, and you don't know what it is, you can see how this can turn the wrong way. Even our narcotics dogs are out there detecting this. We'd have to train them differently, because they're detected to sniff. That's how they're trained, is to do a detection with sniff. But now it's like sit and bark in some cases because it's so deadly. People are trying this one time and dying from it. Let's get into what it really is. Again, it can be absorbed through the skin through touch. People are eating this. They're sniffing this stuff. They're injecting this stuff. They're chewing this stuff. We don't have time to watch this, but you could Google pandemic overshadows growing opioid epidemic in Arizona, and you will get the news link on AZ Family. It's a almost 7-minute story that aired on March 14th. I know, because I was a part of the story and I was the expert, right, sharing the information. But it's pretty sad when I have to work with a mom who's from Prescott, whose teenage daughter is dead because she touched the fentanyl, touched her face, and died. Mom caught it all on camera, because so many of these homes now have cameras in them, right? I tell the children now, when I get an opportunity, tell people this, but again, I work a lot with kids. You now live in a time where you can touch a drug, touch your face, and die. Welcome to 2021, right? Like, I just want people's takeaway to be that drugs evolve, that they change. They don't go away. There's never been a year where we've been drug free. Drugs are always around, but we got to stay with the trends. So again, when people ask me to do an opioid class, there's too much information. It's not just painkillers and how we're, coping. It's also the street stuff. Heroin use is still prevalent. It's still out there. It's effective if someone's trying to find a alternative to pain, right? And if they can't access pills, they might use heroin. When they get into the fentanyl, let's skip reading it. Look at pictures. Pills, powders, patches. That one even looks like a lollipop. And that brand name Actique, you have to understand that fentanyl has a legitimate purpose. It is an extreme painkiller, right? Somebody a long time ago, like before it started being big on black market, on the streets, is in hospice, end of life care. They might get that swab on the lollipop in their mouth to alleviate the pain. The micrograms, not milligrams, the microgram dosing on that patch might be administered through the skin. But sadly, again, this is not a class for kids because this will be teaching them, but we've got people who would chew those patches, put those patches on their skin and heat it up with a hair dryer, eat that lollipop and die of respiratory arrest. M30 pills, that's pretty common. You might see that on the news. They talk a lot about that, but that's an example. And here's the one that if I only had 5 slides to show you, this would make the cut. This is a deadly dose. This literally shows you how minuscule the amount of fentanyl, how effective this is. So if someone's buying, doses, batches of this, they only need to cut like little bits of it into their product. And again, that can be street drugs, that can be prescription medication, and you might not know what it is. You know what I mean? When you touch it and stuff like that. It's coming from China. It's coming from Mexico. At this point, it's coming from absolutely anywhere. And sadly, with the internet, we can figure out really quick ways to manufacture this. I would say on average, you could spend $3,500 to $5,000 as an investment and profit $800,000 to $1 million in sales with this stuff. Again, I work with narcotics officers. I will be at a narcotics conference learning more about this in June, but we talk regularly about this, why we need to take note of this, why we need to have those officers trained to intervene and stop the flow of this drug. Because what you can do with fentanyl, with an envelope, what it might take a truckload of drugs to do damage. You know what I'm saying? Like, heroin's really bad, but compare an envelope to a truckload of drugs. Fentanyl's effective. Things that you might not remember, but just a quick refresher: Prince, Tom Petty. There's been overdoses and deaths tied to this, big ones. But here in Arizona, we even saw cases where kids were impacted by this. These kids at Notre Dame Prep thought that they were using Percodan, using and selling. Turns out it was fentanyl. Turns out that dad, one of the fathers, that whole family's lucky. The dad went to check on his kid, finds him unresponsive in his room, calls 911. They end up Narcaning this kid 7 times throughout the night to keep him alive. Again, kid thought it was Percocet. They check the school. They find all this fentanyl on campus. Some of you might recall a couple of years ago when we were dealing with spice. It's a couple of years ago, and that's probably been like 10. But they kept saying like, oh my gosh, there's so many different derivatives of this. One's illegal and then another one pops up. I was going to say, not to overwhelm and make you sad, probably too late. Well, look at fentanyl. Furafentanyl, acrofentanyl, carfentanyl. I talk about this drug. I show you the dosing. There's so many different sisters or cousins or legs to it. These tiny little molecules are so hard to detect. Narcan might work. It might not, because there's so many different derivatives. So naloxone, I kind of use the words interchangeably. I should probably clarify, but Narcan is the nasal spray. There's also the auto injectables, different injectables that come with voice instructions. They can be kind of expensive. I think the Narcan is the more affordable and available, but take note of this. I've also given you guys some pages that you can copy, resources that you can look at to understand how naloxone is saving lives and how it's literally an opioid reversal medication. If someone were overdosing, they can bring them back. And sadly, nowadays, that's probably one of the first things that first responders do when they see someone non-responsive. They make the assumption that it's from an opioid. So a lot of the things I've been talking, I know I'm talking quickly, but again, watching the clock, there's so much to cover. I'm trying to give you guys the professional resources to really dig deep into this stuff. This is not the best slide because it's, too much information. I've been trying to summarize it by speaking to you and showing you the colorful pages like this that break it down. Some of the bigger fentanyl type drugs that are out there. So carfentanil, 100 times stronger than fentanyl. Think about that. And you're like, no way is that around here. There's actually been cases here in Arizona. There's been cases around the country, but a lot of times these pills show up looking like something else and we're not familiar with what it is. Again, here in Arizona, the first death occurred in 2018. I always got a question if people know what Zohydro is, because look at how it contains 50 milligrams of hydrocodone, 10 times more powerful than Vicodin. I remember watching Dr. Oz back in the day and learning about this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a capsule. I could just break it apart. I understand the push for different medications, but at the same time, when it comes to addiction, abuse, a lot of these drugs are successful because, money and addiction, right? An addict will pay any price and people benefit financially, whether they're pharmaceuticals, cartels, drug dealers on the street. Money ties to a lot of this. So if this sounds overwhelming to tell you that the FDA approved something that's 10 times stronger than fentanyl, 1,000 times stronger than morphine. Again, if I were sitting in front of you, I'd watch the jaws drop. Desuvia was approved. And sure, maybe there are extreme cases, but if we're going with the trends, we're seeing how many people have accessibility to a lot of these drugs and have found a way. Honestly, I remember the first time talking about fentanyl years ago, like that it was hopefully just like a fluke, that it was a rare thing that really wasn't going to happen. And now it's the drug of choice in Arizona. U47700, U4, pink, a lot of different names to this, is also another form of fentanyl. And I can sadly tell you about, just to give an example, who gets a hold of this. The internet exposes us to so much that we've even had cases in Park City where 2 13-year-old boys died from this. Can you imagine? I mean, I know young kids, I know brain development, I know, but this is just shocking to look at little kids accessing such a extreme synthetic drug, 7 times stronger than morphine. I guys, resource wise, give you guys the HIDA, Arizona High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. AZ HIDA is also a good website for you guys to take a look at to see the trends. Law enforcement did release the 2020 DEA Drug Threat Assessment report. So that would be another good one. I think it's towards the end of here. Just making me think where I get all my resources. Gray death doesn't even sound good to begin with, right? Deadly combination of heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, and U4. Based on everything that you've learned, I feel like that this would be a deadly combination, and it has appeared around the country, and you can see some of the stories and reports from CNN, and again, in the HIDA reports. So what are we doing to help? Okay, I feel like I raced through that, and okay, we've got time. I can take questions in a few minutes, but I just want to talk about everybody. I might work for Community Bridges, but I realize how many resources have got to come together to save lives, right? First responders, great. How they treat individuals, police, but picking up criminals off the street, we can't arrest this away. We can't treat it away. I can't educate it away. We've got to partner up. So at CBI, Community Bridges, Inc., we've been around since the early 80s. I do want to share that we have very specific programs that are out there, like our SOR State Opioid Response Navigator program. So again, we have navigators who are literally out there on the street who pick up individuals, do all of the jail outreach, specific programs to women. If you aren't familiar with navigators and peers at Community Bridges, again, I shouldn't make assumptions. Big agency like us, I think our standout fact is that over 75% of our employees are in recovery themselves, right? That they've made it, that they were the people I talk about. They might have been the homeless, the drug user, the missing out on their resources, the physical addiction, but they've turned their lives around and are assisting and giving back. When I keep saying CBI, we also look at it as celebrate, believe, and inspire. We completely celebrate recovery. Our staff in recovery believe in themselves and inspire others. So we have great relationships with like the local hospitals, right? We have an MOU with them where we can, through the ER referrals, go and pick up clients. Our first responders, they know about us. They know where to bring them to community bridges. We operate our center of excellence at various locations 24/7 with our different programs, our outpatient services. We have our, I want to say all the acronyms, but I should say them out loud. PCMH is our patient-centered medical homes, where one individual is under one home, one roof, where they can access various levels of care, right? Medical, physical, behavior, all at one site. And of course, we're going to offer MAT services, medication-assisted treatment. Something like meth, they really just don't have alternatives. They've got to kind of come down, if you will, from it. But we can offer everything from our buprenorphine, our methadone, our different medications to assist with. Remember, I go back to this. It's not going to take it away. It's maybe going to lessen the symptoms, get them through the hell week, which can turn into a month, and give them hope to get through the physical withdrawal of a lot of these substances. If you have questions about our agency, we're a statewide provider. When I say offer, continuum of care, I love how unique we are. I didn't share this, but in January, maybe it's because I'm like, whoa, time's adding up. I'll have been there 20 years in January. I've literally watched us grow from this little agency to this statewide monster care program that's saving lives, from not just where we started with helping the homeless, but now we provide adolescent services. We have, again, specific programs for veterans. We have specific programs for pregnant women. We offer care across the board to anyone. Again, we're today attending a program or attending a conference that's for veterans, families, the community. Be Connected. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them. If not, our partnership here with the Be Connected program is very, very important. You've got the phone number right here. I mean, ultimately with Be Connected, we're trying to just improve our housing, reduce suicide, increase the connection among our veteran community. Obviously depression and suicide, we've talked a lot about that, but we're hoping to reduce the numbers here. 1-866-429-8387 for AZ vets. Take a picture, put it in your phone. We need to have resources at our fingertips. BeConnectedAZ.org. I'm telling you, there's no wrong door here. We're here to help. I'm going to give you some other resources here as well. Again, this is really just kind of more of an overview of the wraparound services that we provide with our unique peer program that gets out there on the street, literally going to the veterans and bringing them to us. You got to just imagine the picture of somebody who lived that life, that knows where to go in the community to find and help. I should have put the picture and video, but again, I already had 90 slides. Logic, the rapper, to me, I always think of him when I look at the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, did a song called 800-273-8255. Look that up. Google Logic and the song, or the prevention, Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And it's moving to see the survivors with the number on their shirts. My point is, put it in your phone. We're all struggling. We're surviving through a pandemic. Again, I raced through a lot of this because I want to make sure we have time for questions here in a few minutes. But I also want to I'm pausing if you guys aren't taking notice of things you can take pictures of to put in your phone. There's a lot of drug testing services. You can go to the store and buy something. But I appreciate people who stay with me after a presentation, who come up to me as a father, but also, a part of a program, Fastest Labs. And he's like, give out our information. Let people know about the drug testing services that we provide, the results we can get in 5 minutes about nicotine and 17 other drugs. There's a lot of times parents don't know this and they want to know what's going on. In terms of adolescent resources, I'm never going to give just one resource. because clearly from the beginning of this presentation, I opened up with talking about the increases in suicides, the increases in drug overdose deaths, and how it's happening earlier and earlier. CommunityBridgesAZ.org, the Pathway Program out of Tempe for young adults and adolescents, Charlie Health. How interesting is this? I just recently met them. Started doing virtual classes before the pandemic. They were like, oh, we're going to work with adolescents in very specific groups virtually. And then about a couple months later, pandemic happened. And Teen Lifeline is very specific to teens and suicide. Because here's the thing, guys. I take that big sigh there. I realize it's almost the doom and gloom talk, sharing what's going on out there. But my takeaway always is that life is truly a precious gift, right? Like tomorrow's not a given. You've got to use your time wisely. I was asking how many people are going to be in my group, right? Because I want to know that this time was well spent. So if you want to turn on your cameras here, I'm just going to show you, this is the last slide. If you want to take a picture, if you need this PowerPoint, more information, you want to help me spread more information at other events or other groups, I'm an open book. That's my cell phone. That's my email. There's our Facebook page. There's our 24/7 access to care line. We're here to help you. And I know you had a lot of choices. So that's why when I go back to this slide, thank you for choosing this workshop. And hopefully you learned something new or that you can apply. But with that said, I think we have 6 minutes. Let's open this up for questions. And I'm going to stop sharing slides. So if you want, I'd love to see your faces. It's okay to turn on your cameras or a picture of yourself. You know why I say that, you guys? It's because doing all these student talks, I see a ceiling fan. And I'm like, are you guys really there? We're missing the connection. See it like, yay, thank you, Pam. I'm going to call you out right there. Lindsay's got pretty flowers. Thank you for waving, Heidi. You guys, this is our new normal. It's okay. We have to be able to check in with one another. We have to pick up this phone and text and FaceTime and make sure people are okay. And I'm going to turn it over to I see there's some chat questions. I'll stop talking. What is the process for getting access? Haley Coles with Sonoran Prevention Works is who I would go to for the naloxone training. What is the prevalence of Skittles, farm parties? Wow, you're taking me back. I knew if I started just talking, this is a class about opioids. And then let me just, before I even answer the questions, in case there's multiple questions about this, I do a drug trends training that's 90 minutes. Call me, text me. Where are we going to do this at? Let's schedule it. We can make our own Zooms. That's fine. But a lot of this stuff is ever changing. I see we go way back. Is this? Oh yeah, Sunny Slope. Yeah, let's date myself. I've been talking about drugs for almost 20 years. And before that, to tie this all together, my first job out of college was how shocking is this, or ironic, I should say, was doing tobacco education. And you know what I used to say? Good thing there's no such thing as liquid nicotine, because one pure drop would be so dangerous and poisonous. And now that's the #1 seller. So display your email address. I'll put it in the chat. How about that? It's siete@cbridges.com. So my first initial last name at cbridges.com. Oh, it went to Tim. Do I need that to go to everybody? Or you can send it back out? All right, you guys, I have to scroll back because the questions are going fast. If anyone has questions, please post them. I want to make sure I try to get them on here for everybody. Oh, the Take Back program. You guys are so right. That's this Saturday. It's always very timely. I always find it very timely when I get invited to a big conference like this. The Take Back to the drug drop-off day. You can go to the takebackday.dea.gov is this weekend. And then how funny, not funny, but it was just like National Marijuana Day the other day, 4/20. Ironic. Well, I'm looking at the questions. 7/10, look that up, is another marijuana day. Suicide, we're near the top. I just looked at that. There's other countries that are greater, sadly, than us, but we're up there with suicide. It's amazing how animals can pick us up. I know, I like how I'm done presenting. In my two, I should show you laying on the floor. First, I had to chew my feet while I was talking. Brief would be great. Okay. Some of these are just asking for resources, links to the articles. Do you guys have other, I mean, I'm okay if they want to turn on their mics and ask questions too.
They've been unmuted, so you can do that if they want to ask a quick question. We will have to stop though at 10:25 to get the next session going, just so you know.
Okay. Any questions? Prevalence of Skittles and farm parties. Farm parties, obviously, you could just be a school stopped for a little bit. Doesn't mean drug stopped. We know that. Everything was happening even more so. And I think my job even evolved into doing more FaceTime or calls with parents and kids. Kids were still using. What are we doing to help? What is AP? Yeah. I love all some of these are bigger questions. Hold on, I'm just scrolling through. Jump in if you have the question. Oh, there's the rap song. Thank you guys. These are all like, Tim put that in there. That's awesome. Oh, I told you about naloxone. What is your take on legalized marijuana? Okay, I have to do this really fast. I hate that we said marijuana. What we should have done is talked about the chemicals of marijuana. That's how we should have broken it down. THC, psychoactive substance found in marijuana, CBD, medicinal purposes. We should have been more about maybe we're legalizing CBD because of medical value and what it does with helping somebody with pain management or helps reducing seizures versus THC. Maybe there should have been a restriction on that because of its potency levels nowadays going from 3% to 90%. It's kind of like heroin. I would just say all the drugs in general have skyrocketed in terms of potency. So I think we missed the opportunity to do better with the marijuana laws. And again, look at it from the national perspective, right? We say it's federally illegal, but then we have 50 states with different laws. So we really still haven't identified.
Any final thoughts, Stephanie, before we have to end? I'm sorry we have to end on time.
No. I'm so grateful for all of you guys. I really hope this was helpful. I put my email in there. If you want the PowerPoint, if you want to schedule other events, I miss connecting. So thank you for some of you turning your cameras on and let me know how I can help you on a larger level. I'm happy to do it. Thank you so much for choosing this class.